Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. SmarterFan1738 here, and welcome to another installment of LNER Locomotive Profiles. This time we will be talking about the most famous out of all the LNER types, the Gresley A4 Pacifics. I hope you guys enjoy. The LNER's Express Pacific designs were probably the most famous of the LNER locomotives. And of these Pacifics, the A4 is probably the most famous of all. Its distinctive streamlining has come to be a symbol of 1930s luxury and fascination with speed. Even today, it is the A4 which holds the world speed record for a steam locomotive. By the 1930s, the railways were beginning to see increased competition from road and air travel. It was clear that services between the major cities had to be faster, more reliable, and more comfortable. Also, a number of high-speed diesel trains were attracting the world's headlines. In May 1933, the German State Railway's diesel-electric Fliegende Hamburger entered service, with long stretches of 85 miles an hour required by the scheduled timetable. By 1934, the U.S. Burlington Zephyr had reached 112.5 miles an hour during a longer 1,015-mile journey. Gresley traveled on the Fliegende Hamburger and was impressed by the need for streamlining, although he realized it was only useful at the highest speeds. From this, he calculated that a streamlined and modified A3 design would be able to haul trains of 8 or 9 carriages at similar speeds. Both the Fliegende Hamburger and Burlington Zephyr were much smaller. A series of trials were carried out to confirm that a modified A3 design would be sufficient. During these, A1 Flying Scotsman broke 100 miles an hour, and A3 Papyrus managed average speeds almost as fast as Fliegende Hamburger, but with a larger coach capacity. On this latter run, Papyrus managed to set a speed record of 108 miles an hour. With these trials under his belt, the LNER board gave Gresley the go-ahead to create the Silver Jubilee streamlined trains. The Silver Jubilee was designed as a complete streamlined train, including streamlined coaches. These had valances between the bogies and flexible covers over the coach ends. Although this restricted their use, it maximized the streamlining effects and proved useful for publicity. The train had capacity for 198 passengers on 7 coaches, twin articulated brake third, triple articulated restaurant set, and a twin articulated first class. The wedge-shaped streamlining on the A4 is inspired by a Bugatti railcar which Gresley had observed in France. The design was refined with the help of Professor Dolby and the wind tunnel facilities at the National Physical Laboratory at Teddington. As well as streamlining, it was important that the design lifted smoke up away from the cab. At first, there was a lot of difficulty in achieving this. Even smoke deflectors were considered. During the wind tunnel tests, it was noticed that a thumbprint had inadvertently been added to the plasticine model just behind the chimney. Only on impulse was the model retested with the thumbprint. Amazingly, the smoke was lifted well clear of the cab. The LNER publicity machine had a field day with the new streamlined shape. Many saw this publicity as mere hype. Some thought the LNER was bowing to the latest craze. Others thought that it was not true streamlining and that the design team did not know what they were doing. In fact, experimental data showed that a 40% reduction in horsepower is required when powering from 60 miles an hour to 150 miles an hour. The high speed of 150 miles an hour was used to simulate a headwind. This saving ranged from 41 horsepower at 60 miles an hour to 639 horsepower at 150 miles an hour. As well as the characteristic streamlining, a number of other things were modified from the A3 design. All of the steam passages were streamlined. The boiler pressure was increased from 220 psi to 250 psi. The cylinders were decreased slightly in size so that the valve diameters could be increased to 9 inches. This produced free steaming within the restrictions of the 3-cylinder design. As with the A3, Walsh-Chart's gear was used on the outside cylinders, and Gresley's conjugated gear was used for the inside cylinder. Further refinements were added at a later date, including the Kyle-Chat double blast pipe exhaust and Westinghouse QSA brake valves. A demonstration run from King's Cross to Grantham on the 27th of September 1935 touched 112.5 miles an hour. The first service was on the 1st of October 1935, hauled by number 2509 Silver Link. A further 3 locomotives were built for the Silver Jubilee service to Newcastle. This service was a great success, cutting the travel time between King's Cross and Newcastle down to an amazing 4 hours. This success led to an extension of the service to Edinburgh and the building of a further 5 A4s. By 1937, a third service to Leeds and Bradford had commenced, and thus Britain's first intercity network of fast train services was born. The Silver Jubilee service to Newcastle was a success from the beginning. This was because it supplied the public exactly what they wanted: a fast, reliable service between 2 major cities. Success was so great that the trains were extended from 7 coaches to 8 coaches. Reliability was such that it was said that the people of York checked their watches against the characteristic chime whistle at the Silver Jubilee A4 coming through York Station. The Silver Jubilee was also safe. Never in the 4 years was it involved in a major mishap. And by that is the 4 years to World War II. The A4s were also mechanically reliable. Only on 10 occasions out of a total of 1,952 Silver Jubilee services did an A4 experience a mechanical problem. Drivers and firemen were happy too. They found the A4s easily took the loads required of them. They also found the footplate very smooth. This was demonstrated on the original publicity run, when the driver and fireman thought they had barely gone above 90 miles an hour. In reality, they had touched 112 miles an hour. Another A4 trial was performed on the 27th of August, 1936. This time, the newest A4 2512 Silver Fox was chosen, and was driven by Silver Link's George Henry Hagery. The trial was a scheduled fare-paying service, and was intended to measure water and coal consumption, and to beat Silver Link's 112 miles an hour. Total load with the dynamometer car was 270 tons. Alas, they never told George Hagery that a record attempt was to be attempted on Stoke Bank. This meant he neither had sufficient speed on the run up Stoke Bank, nor was there a sufficient reserve of boiler pressure. By pushing hard, 113 miles an hour was reached. This is thought to be a British record for a revenue-earning steam train. But the locomotive had to be pushed hard and the middle big end suffered damage. The train arrived into King's Cross 7 minutes late. On the return journey, 2509 Silver Link was substituted and arrived 4 minutes early. The results of the trial were that the A4s had a reserve of power, and a 10-coach train would be perfectly feasible for a planned Glasgow to London service. On the 28th of June 1937, Stannier's streamlined Coronation Scott of the LMS set a new record of 114 miles an hour. 2 days later, a press and publicity trip for the LNER's new Coronation service, pulled by 4489 Dominion of Canada, attempted to regain the record. Unfortunately, it only managed to reach 109.5 miles an hour on Stoke Bank. With these increasing speeds, braking distances were getting longer, and so methods to improve braking were investigated. Gresley favored the use of a system produced by Westinghouse, and so trials began in 1938. Trials typically required rapid acceleration followed by the brake test. On the 3rd of July, 1938, the Westinghouse team arrived to find that the train consist had changed. Some of the coaches had been removed and replaced with the dynamometer car. Also, the locomotive had been changed to number 4468 Mallard. Only 4 months old, this A4 was the first to be fitted with the Kyle-Chat double blast pipe. The driver was also different. J. Duddington, who had been brought down from Doncaster and had a reputation for running trains hard when it was required. Duddington was joined by Fireman T. Bray and Inspector J. Jenkins. When the Westinghouse team were on board, they were told that they were going to attempt to break the speed record. Why the secrecy? One reason was so that the LMS did not hear the attempt beforehand. Another might be that the LNER Civil Engineering Department were not keen on 120 plus mile an hour runs, when the track had official speed limits of only 90 miles an hour. The down journey consisted of conventional brake tests. At Barkston, the Westinghouse team were given the option of taking a taxi to Peterborough. They all refused. The center big bearing was drowned in cylinder oil, and the return journey commenced. Grantham was passed at 24 miles an hour. By Stoke signal box, the speed had reached 74.5 miles an hour, full regulator and 40% cutoff. At milepost 94, 116 mile an hour was recorded along with the maximum drawbar of 1800 horsepower. 120 mile an hour was achieved between milepost 92.75 and 89.75, and for a short distance of 306 yards, 125 miles an hour was touched. A peak of 126 miles an hour was marked on the dynamometer rolls, and this speed was included in some unofficial reports. 126 mile an hour is also the speed marked on the plaque BR mounted on Mallard in 1948. Gresley never accepted this speed of 126 mile an hour and thought it misleading. The LNER only claimed a peak average of 125 miles an hour, so breaking the world record for steam traction held by the German State Railways and the British record set by the LMS. When Mallard arrived at Peterborough, it was found that the center bearing had overheated. It was then towed to meet the press at King's Cross behind an Ivy Atlantic. This must have led to some confusion, but the overheated bearing was quickly remetaled. A further check was made that everything was okay, and Mallard was back in revenue-earning service within 9 days. Over 60 years later, Mallard's record of 125 miles an hour still stands. Although the Second World War did not start until the 3rd of September 1939, the last streamlined services ran on the 31st of August 1939 due to the enactment of the Emergency Powers Act in 1939. In these early days, services were seriously cut back, and the evacuation trains had started. Over the next few months, many services returned, but timetables were generally much slower than before the war. Freight took priority, and both blackout conditions and lack of maintenance took their toll on Britain's railways. Initially, the King's Cross A4s were put into storage, although the other A4s were kept in service. Eventually, all of the King's Cross A4s returned to service. Generally, the A4s were called upon to pull loads much heavier than originally intended. They did this well, although reduced maintenance produced some problems, especially with the conjugated gear. To aid maintenance, Thompson removed the side skirts from the A4s. Because the A4s were experiencing much increased loads, they occasionally had problems starting off. To help with this, Thompson had the valve gear modified so that a maximum of 75% cutoff was possible. Only 6 locomotives were converted during wartime, with the remainder being converted between 1946 and 1957. A rather weird wartime change was the removal of most of the chime whistles. It was thought that these might be confused with air raid sirens. These were removed in 1942 and destroyed. New chime whistles were built after the war. On the 29th of April, 1942, 4469 Sir Ralph Wedgwood was severely damaged by bomb blast during an air raid in York. Both number 4469 and a neighboring B-16 were scrapped, although the tender from number 4469 was kept and later used on Thompson A2/13696. An attempt to renumber the A4s was proposed by Thompson in 1943. Implementation only started after the war in 1946. Even then, only a handful were renumbered before a new numbering system was chosen by the LNER, with the premier A4s taking numbers 1 to 34. This was implemented in the latter half of 1946. In 1948, the railways were nationalized and the A4s came under the control of BR. The A4s were renumbered again by adding the prefix of 600. In the summer of 1948, BR performed a series of locomotive trials comparing the different classes of the Big Four companies. The A4s produced some good results and had the lowest coal and water consumption figures of any of the expresses. Unfortunately, there were 3 A4 failures, all related to the conjugated motion. These are thought to have been due to poor wartime maintenance. The Gresley's conjugated motion worked well if it received good maintenance. Also during the summer of 1948, there were attempts to restart the non-stop services. In August 1948, serious flooding caused the collapse of a number of bridges and culverts on the East Coast Main Line in southeast Scotland. Hence, many of the trains were diverted via Selby and Leeds over the Settle to Carlisle line. From the 24th of August, the A4's non-stop run was diverted over the Waverley route to St. Boswell's, then via Kelso to Tweedmouth to rejoin the main line. On this first run, number 60028 Walter K. Wigham managed to run non-stop from Edinburgh to King's Cross, a record-setting distance of 408.65 miles. These runs required some luck as regards running in signals, but the drivers took great pride in achieving a non-stop run. The following runs set the non-stop record. For the southbound, there was Walter K. Wiggum on the 24th of August, Walter K. Wiggum on the 26th of August, 60029 Woodcock on the 28th of August, 7th of September, and the 9th of September, 60012 Commonwealth of Australia on the 11th of September, 60022 Mallard on the 15th of September, Woodcock on the 17th of September, and Commonwealth of Australia on the 18th of September. And on the northbound, you had Walter K. Wiggum on the 25th of August, 60027 Merlin on the 26th of August, Woodcock on the 27th of August, 2nd of September, and the 6th of September, Commonwealth of Australia on the 7th of September, Woodcock on the 8th of September, and 60031 Golden Plover on the 9th of September. These records would hold until A3 number 4472 Flying Scotsman's visit to Australia in 1988. During the late 1940s and early 1950s, maintenance of the locomotives in the permanent way improved, so facilitating speed increases of the A4s. Pre-war speeds were never reached, although in 1959, 6007 Sir Nigel Gresley set a post-war steam speed record of 112 miles an hour. By the late 1950s, steam was being replaced by diesel power. Although the Deltics proved worthy successes of the A4s on the East Coast mainline express services, other diesel classes were generally very poor and often failed. Hence, the A4s were kept in service until the mid-1960s. The first A4s were scrapped at the end of 1962. These were from King's Cross and had been directly replaced by the Deltics. The last BR-A4 service was on the 14th of September 1966 between Aberdeen and Glasgow. And so, there you have it. That is the full history of the Gresley A4 Pacifics. I hope you learned something new today. Join me next time when we will be talking about the Thompson A1/1. Thanks for watching. Discord server will be in the link. Hit that subscribe button, and I will see you all next time.